My wife and I had been dreaming of a quaint, secluded home for years. When we found the old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, it felt like fate. The price was unbelievably low, and the house, despite its age, was in good condition. We moved in during the late autumn, the trees bare and the sky a perpetual gray. From the very first night, the house felt off. There was an unsettling stillness, as if the very air held its breath. But we chalked it up to nerves and exhaustion from the move. It was on our second night that we heard it, a faint scratching noise coming from the attic. Our bedroom was on the second floor, and the attic was directly above us. At first, I dismissed it as a squirrel or some other small animal, but the sound was persistent, and it seemed too deliberate, almost rhythmic. "Did you hear that?" my wife Sarah asked, her voice a whisper in the dark. "Probably just a raccoon," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'll check it out tomorrow." The next day, armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, I pulled down the creaky attic ladder and climbed up. The attic was dusty and filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. There were boxes labeled with dates that went back decades, maybe even a century. I walked carefully, the floorboards groaning under my weight. I saw nothing unusual, no sign of any animals. But as I turned to leave, the flashlight beam caught something odd. In the far corner of the attic, there was a small door, almost like a hatch. It was so low that you'd have to crawl to get through it. Curious, I approached it. The door was old and wooden, with a rusted handle. I hesitated, feeling an inexplicable dread. Taking a deep breath, I tugged at the handle. The door opened with a creak that echoed in the silence. Behind it was a small, dark crawl space. I shone the flashlight inside and saw what looked like a bundle of old clothes. Just as I was about to leave, something caught my eye. Among the clothes, there was a small, intricately carved box. I reached in and pulled it out. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and the carvings were beautiful but eerie, depicting strange, contorted faces. I brought the box downstairs, and Sarah and I examined it together. Inside, we found a collection of old photographs, a child's diary, and a tarnished locket. The photographs were black and white, showing a stern-looking family in front of what appeared to be our house. The diary belonged to a girl named Eliza, and as we read through it, a chilling story began to unfold. Eliza wrote about her family, but most notably, she wrote about her brother, Thomas. Thomas, according to the diary, had always been a peculiar child. As he grew older, his behavior became more erratic and disturbing. He claimed to hear voices and see things that no one else could. The family tried to keep it a secret, fearing the stigma of mental illness, especially in those times. The entries grew darker and more frantic. Eliza wrote about strange rituals Thomas would perform in the attic, about how he would sit in the corner, talking to someone only he could see. She mentioned the small door and the crawl space, and how Thomas would disappear there for hours. The final entry was the most unsettling. Eliza wrote about a night when the voices told Thomas to free them. She described waking up to the sound of scratching and found Thomas in the attic, standing in front of the small door. He turned to her, his eyes wide with terror and ecstasy, and said, "They're coming for us." After that entry, the diary abruptly ended. As we finished reading, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. We both felt it, a cold, oppressive presence. That night, the scratching in the attic returned, louder and more insistent. It was as if something was trying to break free. Sarah and I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind set our nerves on edge. Around midnight, we heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the attic. This time, they were heavy, deliberate, moving with a purpose. "I can't take this anymore," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." But we didn't have anywhere else to go, at least not immediately. So we decided to confront whatever it was. We grabbed flashlights and cautiously made our way to the attic. The air was freezing, and our breath formed visible clouds. As we climbed the ladder, the footsteps stopped. The silence was even more terrifying. We reached the attic and shone our flashlights around, the beams cutting through the darkness. Everything was as I had left it, except for the small door. It was open. I approached it, my heart pounding. Inside, the crawl space was empty. The bundle of clothes and the box were gone. But there was something else, a faint, almost imperceptible whispering, like a distant conversation just beyond the range of hearing. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut behind us. We were plunged into darkness, the only light coming from our flashlights. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until it was a cacophony of voices. I felt a hand grip my arm. It was Sarah. "Let's get out of here," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. We scrambled down the ladder and out of the attic, slamming the hatch shut behind us. We didn't stop until we were outside, standing in the cold night air. The house loomed above us, its windows dark and foreboding. The next morning, we packed our things and left. We stayed with friends while we looked for a new place. We never went back to that house, and we never spoke about what happened there. A few months later, I received a call from the real estate agent handling the sale of the house. He told me that the new owners had found something in the attic, a small, intricately carved box. It was empty. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard it again, the faint sound of scratching coming from the walls.